For years, the monarchy worked tirelessly to project an image of perfection. Any sign of weakness, any hint of disability, any crack in the royal facade had to be erased, hidden, forgotten. But here's what they didn't count on. Times would change. And the truth? The truth always comes out. Today, we're pulling back the velvet curtain on 18 British royal family members whose disabilities and health struggles were kept secret from the world. 1. King George VI. We're starting with probably the most famous example on this list, King George VI, who had a severe stammer that he struggled with his entire life. Now, if you've seen the movie The King's Speech, you already know about this, but the reality was even more challenging than what Hollywood showed us. George VI, who became king in 1936 after his brother Edward VIII abdicated the throne, had to address a nation on the brink of World War II while battling a speech impediment that made every public appearance absolutely terrifying for him. Imagine this. You're the King of England. The British Empire spans across the world. Millions of people are looking to you for leadership during the darkest time in modern history, and you can barely get through a sentence without stammering. The pressure must have been unimaginable. The stammer likely developed during his childhood. His father, King George V, was strict and demanding, which created enormous anxiety for the young prince. He was also naturally left-handed, but was forced to write with his right hand, a common practice back then that many experts believe can contribute to speech problems. What's really remarkable is how George VI refused to let his disability stop him. He worked with a speech therapist named Lionel Logue, practicing breathing techniques and exercises for hours every day. His famous radio broadcasts during Wabuit became symbols of British resilience, and people loved him, not despite his stammer, but in some ways because of it. He was real, he was vulnerable, and he never gave up. 2. Queen Victoria. Next up is Queen Victoria, and this one's absolutely fascinating from a genetic perspective. Victoria herself wasn't visibly affected by any disability, but she was a carrier of hemophilia, a blood disorder that prevents blood from clotting properly. And because of her position, she spread this genetic condition throughout the royal families of Europe. Here's why this matters. Hemophilia is passed through the X chromosome. Women can carry it without having symptoms, but their sons have a 50% chance of having the disease, and their daughters have a 50% chance of being carriers. Victoria had 9 children, and through them, the hemophilia gene spread to the royal families of Spain, Germany, and most famously Russia. Several of Victoria's male descendants suffered terribly from this condition. Even a small cut or bruise could lead to dangerous internal bleeding. Her son Leopold died at age 30 from complications of hemophilia. Her grandson Tsarevich Alexei of Russia, the son of Tsar Nicholas II, suffered from the disease so severely that it influenced Russian history. The royal family tried to keep these cases as quiet as possible because any sign of weakness in the bloodline could be politically dangerous. But the truth is, this genetic legacy affected dozens of people across multiple generations. What's particularly tragic is that Victoria had no idea she was carrying this gene. There was no family history of hemophilia on either side, so scientists believe it was a spontaneous mutation. Through no fault of her own, Victoria passed on a condition that caused enormous suffering to her descendants. 3. Prince John. Now we're getting into a story that the royal family literally tried to erase from history. Prince John, the youngest son of King George V and Queen Mary. Prince John was born in 1905, and from an early age, it was clear something was different about him. He suffered from epilepsy, a neurological disorder that causes seizures, and he likely had some form of learning disability as well. At the time, epilepsy was deeply misunderstood and heavily stigmatized. As John grew older and his seizures became more frequent and severe, the royal family made a heartbreaking decision. They essentially hid him away from public view. At age 11, he was moved to a separate house on the Sandringham estate with his nanny, away from the rest of the family. He was rarely photographed, barely mentioned in official records, and when he died in 1919 at just 13 years old following a severe seizure, the official announcement was shockingly brief. The way Prince John was treated reflects the cruel attitudes of that era toward people with disabilities, especially within aristocratic families. His existence was seen as an embarrassment, something to be hidden rather than acknowledged. What makes this even sadder is that by all accounts, John was described as a sweet, loving child. His nanny adored him, and those who knew him spoke warmly of his gentle nature, but because of his condition, he was denied the love and acceptance he deserved from his own family. The story of Prince John is a dark reminder of how far we've come in terms of disability awareness and acceptance. Today, we recognize that people with epilepsy and learning disabilities deserve dignity, support, and inclusion. Prince John didn't get that chance, but his story shouldn't be forgotten. 4. King George III. King George III is probably best known as the king who lost America during the Revolutionary War, but he's also famous for something else, his so-called madness. Throughout his reign, George III suffered from periodic episodes of what appeared to be severe mental illness. He would experience dramatic mood swings, physical illness, confusion, and erratic behavior. During his worst episodes, he would talk nonsensically for hours, couldn't recognize his own family, and had to be physically restrained. For centuries, everyone believed George III was simply insane, but modern medical analysis of historical records suggests he actually suffered from a genetic blood disorder called porphyria, which can cause psychiatric symptoms, severe abdominal pain, and sensitivity to light. During his episodes, George III would be hidden away from the public and sometimes even restrained in a straitjacket, a horrifying treatment by today's standards. His doctors had no idea what was really wrong with him and tried all sorts of bizarre treatments that only made things worse. Despite his illness, George III reigned for nearly 60 years, longer than any of his predecessors. During his lucid periods, he was known as a devoted family man and a patron of the arts and sciences. But his condition progressively worsened, and in 1811, his son was appointed Prince Regent to rule in his place. George III spent the last decade of his life almost completely blind, deaf, and experiencing regular episodes of his mysterious illness. He died in 1820 at age 81, having lived through more than 50 years of a condition that no one understood. 5. Prince Edward. Moving forward in time, let's talk about Prince Edward, Duke of Kent, the father of Queen Elizabeth II's cousin. This is a less dramatic story, but an important one. Prince Edward struggled with dyslexia, a learning difference that makes reading and processing written information difficult. While dyslexia is much better understood today, when Edward was growing up in the early 1900s, it was often mistaken for laziness or lack of intelligence. Edward struggled academically throughout his school years, which must have been incredibly frustrating given the high expectations placed on royal children. The education system wasn't designed to accommodate different learning styles, and children with dyslexia were often labeled as poor students. What's interesting is that despite these challenges, Prince Edward had a successful military career and became a respected member of the royal family. He proved that academic struggles don't define someone's capabilities or intelligence. Dyslexia affects the way the brain processes language, but it has nothing to do with overall intelligence. In fact, many people with dyslexia are highly creative, excellent problem solvers, and strong in visual thinking. 6. Queen Alexandra. Queen Alexandra, wife of King Edward VII, was considered one of the most beautiful royals of her time. But behind her elegant appearance, she was dealing with a disability that progressively worsened throughout her life: deafness. Alexandra began experiencing hearing loss after a serious illness in 1867, likely from otosclerosis, a condition where abnormal bone growth in the middle ear prevents sound from being transmitted properly. As the years went on, her hearing continued to deteriorate until she became almost completely deaf. Imagine being in Alexandra's position, constantly attending state functions, diplomatic meetings, and social events where conversation is essential, all while struggling to hear what people are saying. She became skilled at reading lips and would position herself strategically in conversations to see people's faces. But it was a constant challenge. What's remarkable is that Alexandra never let anyone openly acknowledge her disability. She maintained her social obligations with grace and dignity, even though she was increasingly isolated by her inability to hear. People close to her would speak slowly and clearly, but in public, her deafness was treated as if it didn't exist. The royal family's silence on her condition reflects the stigma around disabilities at the time. Admitting a queen had a disability was seen as showing weakness, so Alexandra suffered in silence rather than receiving the support and accommodation she needed. 7. Princess Margaret. Princess Margaret, Queen Elizabeth II's younger sister, is known for her glamorous lifestyle and rebellious nature. But behind the parties and tabloid headlines, Margaret struggled with severe depression and mental health issues throughout her life. Margaret's struggles stemmed from multiple sources. She was forbidden from marrying the man she loved, Group Captain Peter Townsend, because he was divorced. This heartbreak, combined with living in the shadow of her sister the Queen, created enormous emotional pain. Throughout her adult life, Margaret dealt with depression, anxiety, and later turned to alcohol and smoking to cope. She also suffered from chronic health problems that were likely worsened by stress and mental health struggles. The royal family didn't openly discuss mental health at all during this era. Margaret's struggles were dismissed as her being difficult or dramatic, rather than recognizing that she needed proper mental health support. What's particularly sad is that Margaret had no real outlet for her feelings. She couldn't seek therapy without it becoming a scandal. She couldn't speak openly about her struggles, and she was expected to maintain a perfect public image at all times. By the end of her life, Margaret had suffered multiple strokes and other health problems. She died in 2002 at age 71, having spent decades struggling with conditions that could have been better managed with proper support and without stigma. 8. King Charles III. Now let's talk about someone currently on the throne, King Charles III. You might have noticed something unusual about his hands in photographs. They often appear swollen, with his fingers looking puffy. This has been nicknamed sausage fingers by the media, and Charles himself has even joked about it. While the royal family hasn't officially confirmed the cause, medical experts who've analyzed photos believe Charles may suffer from edema, which is swelling caused by fluid retention. This can be related to several conditions, including arthritis, which Charles has been rumored to have. The swelling appears to vary. Sometimes his hands look relatively normal, other times they're noticeably puffy. This is consistent with inflammatory conditions that can flare up based on various factors like diet, stress, or weather. Additionally, Charles has been open about having been diagnosed with cancer, though the specific type hasn't been disclosed. He's undergoing treatment while continuing his royal duties, showing remarkable dedication. What's different about Charles compared to earlier generations is that he's been relatively open about his health challenges, while specific details remain private. The fact that his condition is acknowledged rather than completely hidden shows how attitudes have changed. Charles has also been a long-time advocate for alternative medicine and holistic health approaches, likely informed by his own experiences managing chronic conditions. 9. Princess Beatrice. Princess Beatrice, daughter of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, has been incredibly open about her dyslexia and, in doing so, has become an important advocate for children with learning differences. Beatrice was diagnosed with dyslexia at age 7. Like Prince Edward before her, she struggled with reading, writing, and processing written information in traditional educational settings. But unlike previous generations, Beatrice received proper support and accommodations. What's really cool about Beatrice is that she's used her platform to normalize learning differences. She's spoken publicly about her experiences, visited schools to encourage kids with dyslexia, and worked with charities that support people with learning disabilities. Beatrice has said that having dyslexia taught her resilience and creative problem solving. She learned to approach challenges differently and developed strengths that served her well in life. She successfully graduated from university and has built a career outside of her royal duties. By being open about her dyslexia, Beatrice has helped reduce the stigma around learning differences. She's shown that having dyslexia doesn't limit your potential. It just means you learn differently, and that's completely okay. Her advocacy represents a huge shift in how the royal family handles disabilities. Instead of hiding them, Beatrice has embraced her difference and used it to help others. That's pretty awesome. 10. The Bowes-Lyon sisters. This next story is one of the most controversial and heartbreaking in modern royal history. It involves two of the Queen Mother's nieces, Nerissa and Catherine Bowes-Lyon, who had severe learning disabilities and were hidden away in an institution for decades. Nerissa and Catherine were born in 1919 and 1926, respectively, and both had significant developmental disabilities. In 1941, when they were in their teens and 20s, their family committed them to the Royal Earlswood Hospital, a mental institution in Surrey. Here's where it gets really shocking. The royal family essentially pretended they didn't exist. In Burke's peerage, or ik weet, ongeveer, Guide to British Aristocracy, the sisters were listed as dead even though they were very much alive. The Queen Mother, their aunt, reportedly never visited them. They spent decades in the institution with virtually no contact from their royal relatives. The sisters lived in this institution for over 40 years. Nerissa died in 1986, and Catherine lived until 2014, spending nearly her entire life institutionalized. When the story became public in the 1980s, it caused a major scandal and raised serious questions about how the royal family treated family members with disabilities. This story reflects the truly awful attitudes toward people with intellectual disabilities in the early to mid-20th century. Rather than being supported and included, they were hidden away and forgotten. The family clearly saw them as an embarrassment, which is absolutely heartbreaking. The treatment of the Bowes-Lyon sisters stands in stark contrast to how the royal family handles similar situations today. 11. Prince William. Prince William has been more open about mental health than perhaps any senior royal before him, and that openness comes from personal experience. The trauma of losing his mother, Princess Diana, when he was just 15 years old, led to years of grief and depression. William has spoken publicly about how he struggled to process his mother's death, especially having to grieve so publicly while the whole world watched. He's described feeling anger, confusion, and overwhelming sadness. For years, he tried to push down these emotions rather than deal with them. It wasn't until much later, in his 20s, that William sought help and learned healthy ways to cope with his trauma and grief. He's been honest about the fact that grief doesn't have a timeline and that mental health is an ongoing journey. What's significant is that William has used his experience to champion mental health causes. Along with his wife, Catherine, and his brother, Harry, he launched the Heads Together campaign to reduce stigma around mental health and encourage people to seek help. By being vulnerable and sharing his struggles, William has helped normalize conversations about mental health, especially among men who often feel pressure to hide their emotions. 12. Catherine. Catherine, Princess of Wales, has dealt with a severe pregnancy complication called hyperemesis gravidarum during all 3 of her pregnancies. While pregnancy isn't a disability, hyperemesis gravidarum is a serious medical condition that severely impacts daily life. Unlike typical morning sickness, hyperemesis gravidarum causes extreme nausea and vomiting that can lead to dehydration, weight loss, and hospitalization. Catherine was hospitalized multiple times during her pregnancies because the condition was so severe. Imagine dealing with this level of illness while knowing the entire world is watching and commenting on your appearance and health. Catherine had to attend royal engagements even when she was feeling absolutely awful, and there were times she had to cancel appearances because the condition was too severe. By being open about her diagnosis, Catherine has helped raise awareness about hyperemesis gravidarum, which affects about 1 to 2% of pregnant women. Many women with this condition feel isolated and guilty, so having someone as high profile as Catherine acknowledge it helps validate their experiences. Catherine's experience also highlights how even conditions that are temporary can be genuinely disabling. During her worst periods, she couldn't carry out her normal duties and needed medical intervention and rest. 13. Prince Harry. Prince Harry has become one of the most vocal advocates for mental health, drawing on his own experiences with PTSD, anxiety, and the lasting effects of childhood trauma. Like his brother, Harry was deeply affected by his mother's death, but he's described his coping mechanism as trying to suppress all emotions. For years, he pushed down his grief and pretended everything was fine, which eventually led to a complete breakdown in his late 20s. Harry has also spoken about experiencing PTSD from his military service. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a helicopter pilot and witnessed traumatic events that continued to affect him long after he returned home. He described having panic attacks, severe anxiety, and turning to alcohol to numb his feelings. What's really important about Harry's story is that he eventually sought therapy and has been very open about how much it helped him. He's spoken about using various therapeutic techniques, including EMDR therapy specifically for trauma processing. Harry has used his platform to encourage others, especially military veterans and men in general, to prioritize their mental health. He's been involved in numerous mental health initiatives and has been remarkably candid about his own struggles. Whether you agree with all of Harry's choices or not, his willingness to speak openly about mental health has undoubtedly helped reduce stigma and encourage others to seek help. That's a valuable contribution regardless of other controversies. 14. Zara Tindall. Zara Tindall, Princess Anne's daughter, has been open about experiencing multiple miscarriages, which affects both physical and mental health in profound ways. Zara has spoken publicly about the heartbreak of pregnancy loss, including having a miscarriage right before Christmas one year. She's described the emotional devastation of losing pregnancies and the physical toll it takes on the body. Pregnancy loss is incredibly common. It affects about 10 to 20% of known pregnancies, but it's rarely discussed openly, especially among public figures. The silence around miscarriage often makes people who experience it feel isolated and alone in their grief. By sharing her story, Zara has helped normalize conversations about pregnancy loss and validated the experiences of countless women who've gone through similar heartbreak. She's shown that it's okay to grieve, it's okay to struggle, and it's okay to talk about it. Zara eventually went on to have 3 children, but she's been clear that the losses she experienced will always be part of her story. Her openness has been particularly meaningful because she didn't have to share something so personal, but she chose to in order to help others. 15. King George V. Let's end with King George V, who dealt with significant chronic health problems throughout his reign, including chronic pain that affected his daily life. George V suffered from a serious riding accident early in his reign that left him with chronic pain and mobility issues. He also struggled with severe respiratory problems, likely chronic obstructive pulmonary disease from years of heavy smoking. Despite his health challenges, George V ruled for 25 years, including through World War I. He maintained his royal duties even when he was in significant pain, rarely letting the public see how much he was struggling. Near the end of his life, George V's health deteriorated rapidly. He required oxygen regularly and could barely walk. In 1936, he became so ill that his physician actually hastened his death with a lethal injection of morphine and cocaine, a decision that was kept secret for decades. George V's story shows that chronic pain and illness don't discriminate based on status or position. He had access to the best medical care available at the time, but he still suffered. His determination to fulfill his duties despite his conditions shows incredible dedication, though today we'd hopefully encourage more balance between duty and health. 16. Princess Alice, Duchess of Gloucester. Imagine living to be 102 years old. Sounds like a blessing, right? But what if you spent the last 20 years of that life not knowing who you are? Not recognizing your own children, not even remembering you were once a princess. This was the reality for Princess Alice, Duchess of Gloucester, and the royal family worked hard to make sure you never knew about it. Princess Alice was born in 1901, which means she lived through both world wars, saw the invention of airplanes and the internet, and witnessed the reigns of 6 different monarchs. She married into the royal family in 1935 and seemed to have the perfect aristocratic life. But longevity came with a terrible price. Starting in the 1990s, Alice began showing signs of dementia. At first, it was small things, forgetting names, getting confused about dates. But it got worse, much worse. By the end, she had severe Alzheimer's disease. She didn't recognize her own grandchildren. She would get upset and confused, not understanding why strangers, actually her family, kept visiting her. Here's what makes this so tragic. Alice outlived her husband and 2 of her 3 sons. She lived long enough to see her grandson marry, to witness history being made all around her, but she couldn't experience any of it. Her mind was trapped in a fog she couldn't escape. The royal family kept her condition very quiet. After the mid-1990s, you almost never saw photos of her. She was kept away from public events, living in Kensington Palace, but essentially invisible. When she finally died in 2004, many people didn't even know she'd still been alive. She lived for 102 years, but spent her final decades lost inside her own mind. 17. King Edward VII. 12 cigars, 20 cigarettes, every single day. That was King Edward VII's daily smoking habit, and it literally killed him. But the royal court spent years pretending he was the picture of health, even as he was slowly suffocating. Edward VII was known as the Playboy Prince before he became king. He loved food, women, gambling, and especially smoking. He waited 59 years to become king. His mother, Queen Victoria, lived forever, and by the time he finally got the crown in 1901, his body was already falling apart. Look at photos of Edward. The man was massive. We're talking well over 200 pounds, with a waist so large his tailors had to create special clothing. He huffed and puffed just walking upstairs. His face was often red and bloated. He had a persistent hacking cough that everyone at court just pretended not to notice. But the court kept insisting, the king is in excellent health. Just 2 days before his coronation in 1902, Edward collapsed in agony. Appendicitis. He needed emergency surgery, which was incredibly dangerous back then, on Nametal. He nearly died on the operating table. The coronation had to be postponed. But did he slow down? Did he quit smoking? Nope. He went right back to his cigars and cigarettes. In May 1910, Edward had a series of heart attacks. His lungs, destroyed by decades of smoking, couldn't supply enough oxygen to his failing heart. He struggled to breathe, turning blue as he gasped for air. He died on May 6th, just 68 years old. The cause? Decades of smoking, overeating, and ignoring every warning sign his body gave him. The healthy king had smoked himself into an early grave, and everyone had just let it happen. 18. Queen Anne. Imagine being pregnant 17 times. Feeling that hope, that joy, that excitement 17 different times. Now imagine that every single one of those pregnancies ends in heartbreak. Every single one. This was the tragic reality for Queen Anne, and it's one of the most heartbreaking stories in royal history. Anne became Queen of England in 1702, but by then, she'd already lived through unimaginable loss. She had at least 17 pregnancies. Some historians say it might have been even more. Only 5 babies were born alive, and tragically, none of them survived past childhood. Her longest living child, Prince William, died at age 11. So what was happening? Modern doctors who've studied her medical records believe Anne probably had something called antiphospholipid syndrome, a condition that causes blood clots and makes it nearly impossible to carry a baby to term. But in the 1700s, nobody understood this. People blamed Anne. They said she was cursed. Some even whispered that God was punishing her. The constant pregnancies destroyed Anne's body. She also suffered from terrible gout, a painful condition that made her joints swell up like balloons. By her coronation, she was in so much pain that she had to be carried into Westminster Abbey on a special chair. She could barely walk. Anne spent her final years as a lonely, grief-stricken woman in constant physical pain. She was overweight, could hardly move, and had outlived every single one of her children. When she died in 1714 at just 49 years old, she had no heir. Her entire line gone. The queen who gave everything for an heir never got to see one survive. What do you think about these stories? Were you surprised by any of them? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video interesting, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating royal history content.